All right, ready to dive into some seriously foggy history.
Sounds intriguing. What are we tackling today?
We're heading straight into Victorian London, taking on the mystery of Jack the Ripper.
Ah, a classic. Everyone's heard the name, but who was he really?
That's what we're hoping to unpack, going through the evidence, the suspects, the whole 9 yards.
It's a case that never really goes away, does it?
Never. And I think it's because it's about more than just the murders themselves.
Right, it's this glimpse into Victorian society, all the anxieties and fears bubbling under the surface.
Exactly. And to understand any of that, you got to start with the victims.
Of course, they were real people caught in this horrible situation.
Yeah, like Mary Jane Kelly. She was only 25, the youngest of the victims. And what gets me is that she was found in her own room.
That's chilling, isn't it? It implies a level of confidence, of familiarity, that's just unsettling.
Totally. Then you have someone like Catherine Eddowes, just trying to get by, listed as a charwoman in the 1881 census.
A stark reminder of the harsh realities of the time.
And the way they were killed, the brutality of it all, it wasn't just about taking a life.
Especially Edo's murder, the facial mutilations, the organs removed. It points to something darker. Maybe even a psychological motive we still don't fully grasp.
It's like trying to decipher a coded message, looking for clues in the most horrific details imaginable.
Exactly. The victims, their lives, their deaths, they hold the key to understanding the Ripper's mind.
So we've got these victims, these horrific crimes, but who's behind it all? Time to talk suspects.
Hundreds of names have been thrown around over the years.
Right, but some are definitely more compelling than others. Take Montague John Druitt, for instance. He was a lawyer, vanished right after the murders, and apparently he had some personal issues.
It makes you wonder, what kind of troubles could push someone to such extremes?
And the fact that he was a lawyer.
Adds another layer, doesn't it? Did his knowledge of the law make him feel untouchable, like he could outsmart the system?
It's a chilling thought. Then you have Francis Tumblety, an American doctor living in London at the time. He had these unconventional medical practices. And, this is the kicker, he openly hated women.
Could that hatred have been the driving force behind the murders? Was he seeking some twisted revenge?
It's impossible to say for sure, but it definitely makes you think.
It does make you wonder about the psychology of it all.
And here's a theory that always gets me, Prince Albert Victor, Queen Victoria's own grandson.
Now that's a theory that sends chills down your spine. Royalty, the Ripper.
Right. Imagine the scandal, the cover-up.
It would have been the biggest story of the century. And it speaks to the anxieties of the time, the idea that even those in power could be capable of such darkness.
The power, the influence, it would have made him practically untouchable.
Exactly.
So we've got our victims, a lineup of suspects, but what about actual evidence? Can we connect the dots with anything concrete?
Well, the Ripper's letters, while many were hoaxes, they might offer some clues.
It's almost like he wanted to be known, Why else write the letters?
That's the mystery, isn't it? Was it about communication, or was it about messing with the police, playing this cat and mouse game?
Especially that Dear Boss letter. That's where the name Jack the Ripper comes from, right?
Yeah.
Like he was crafting his own macabre brand.
It's fascinating, really. Assuming the letter was genuine, of course, it provides a window into the killer's psyche. But even if it's a hoax, it shows how quickly the story took hold, how it captured the public's imagination.
He was like a Victorian-era celebrity, in a way.
Precisely. And that brings up an interesting point, the role of the media in all of this.
Oh, for sure. Can't talk about Jack the Ripper without talking about the newspapers.
This was the era of the penny dreadfuls, remember? Those sensationalist papers, they ate the stuff up.
And they didn't skimp on the details, did they? It's almost like they were turning these horrible murders into, well, entertainment.
It's a tricky thing, balancing reporting the facts with not sensationalizing them. Did the media help or hurt the investigation? Did they fuel the Ripper's ego, make him feel even more important?
And wasn't some of it made up? Just to sell more papers.
Oh, absolutely. Like the whole leather apron thing. The papers ran with this idea that the Ripper was a Jewish immigrant, even though there was no proof.
Crazy how quickly fear and misinformation can take root. Makes you wonder what the Ripper case would be like today with social media and everything.
Can you imagine? It would be nonstop. Every detail, every theory, analyzed to death online.
A bit overwhelming, to
Yeah.
say the least. But it shows you how much the media shaped the story, then and now. So we've got the murders, the media frenzy, but what does it all say about Victorian London itself?
That's what makes this case so fascinating to study, even after all this time. It's a snapshot of a very specific moment in history.
It's easy to romanticize Victorian London with the gaslight and the cobblestones, but it was a tough time for a lot of people.
especially in the East End where the murders took place. Poverty, overcrowding, disease. It was a different world.
And for women, especially women like the Ripper's victims, forced into desperate situations, it was even more dangerous.
Absolutely. They were vulnerable, their lives already a struggle, and their deaths forced society to confront that reality.
It's tragic, really. Their lives were almost invisible until their deaths made them impossible to ignore.
A sad truth. Their murders became a way for society to grapple with its own failings, its own blind spots.
You mentioned earlier that this case was more than just the murders, it was about the time and the place. Could the Ripper murders have happened anywhere else at any other time?
It's hard to say, but I do think that the specific conditions in Whitechapel created this perfect storm of fear, desperation, and opportunity.
And the Ripper, whoever he was a product of that environment, thriving in the shadows of a city on edge. It's pretty amazing how we're still talking about Jack the Ripper, even after all this time.
It's a true crime obsession, isn't it? Books, movies, you name it, the Ripper's got a grip on our imaginations.
He's this almost mythical figure, a legend that just won't quit.
Like a boogeyman come to life.
Oh.
A symbol of the darkness hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. But why are we so drawn to these kinds of stories? The unsolved mysteries, the killers we can't quite catch.
Well, I think there's the mystery itself, right? We're hardwired to crave answers, and with Jack, we've so many questions without any resolution.
Our brains hate loose ends. We can't help but try to solve the puzzle, even after all these years.
Exactly. It's like this puzzle we can't put down, even though we might never find all the pieces. And then there's the historical context. Victorian London, it was a time of huge change, huge upheaval.
Right, this clash between the old world and the new, all these new ideas and anxieties swirling around.
And the Ripper, in a way, he embodies all of that. The dark side of progress, the fear that beneath the surface, civilization's just a thin veneer.
It's like he became a symbol of the Victorian era's dark underbelly, all the hidden dangers and contradictions.
And we can't forget the psychological aspect. The Ripper's crimes, they were so brutal, so seemingly random, they tap into our deepest fears about what humans are capable of.
The fear that anyone, even someone you pass on the street, could be hiding a dark side.
Exactly. It makes you question human nature, doesn't it? Makes you wonder about the darkness that might lie dormant within us all.
It's a chilling thought.
But it's also what makes these stories so powerful. They force us to confront those uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world we live in.
I see what you mean. It makes the story stick with you long after you've heard it.
Exactly.
So where does that leave us? Did we crack the case of Jack the Ripper?
Well, we might never know for sure who he was, but I think we've done something just as important.
And what's that?
We've shed some light on the victims, these women who were more than just names in a case file. And we've explored the world they lived in, a world grappling with change, fear, and the dark side of human nature.
That's a really insightful way to put it. It's easy to get caught up in the mystery, but at the heart of it all, it's a very human story.
Exactly.
It's a story that continues to fascinate and haunt us, even after all these years. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time, keep exploring those unsolved mysteries, but always remember the human stories behind them.